In 2008, during the global financial crisis, one country faced the brunt of economic downturn harder than others: Greece. Today, the country still suffers from the measures taken during this time, as their total outstanding debt eclipses 260 billion euros, and it has payments scheduled as late as 2060. How did it get this bad, and what does it tell us about the impact of austerity measures on real people? Let's find out. First, let's talk about some important terminology that will be used during this video. The 2008 financial crisis could be an entire video on its own, but the only important parts for this video is that many financial investments went sour, causing financial institutions to increase interest rates on national debts for countries whose economies were suffering from a lack of consumer interest, like tourism in Greece. Austerity refers to policy actions that nations take on in order to reduce debt. This can come in the form of increased taxes or decreased welfare spending. Bonds are a form of debt where an entity, like a country, promises to pay a set amount of money, like $1,000 in 10 years, but in the meantime will pay you interest on that $1,000 at a set rate, say 4% every year. Market liberalization in this video will refer to when a state-run corporation becomes privatized and is no longer under control of the government. This could be an example of an austerity measure, as it saves the government money by not needing to render service anymore. Now that these important terms have been defined, let's start talking about the issue at hand: debt and austerity. Catherine Furlong writes how public debt generated through national budget deficits are often placed on the poor and most economically vulnerable in a society to pay off. The story of the Greek debt crisis is another manifestation of this phenomenon. The official crisis began in 2009, but the seeds were sown as early as 2004. While Greece was part of the Eurozone since 1981, it did not accept the euro as a currency until 2004, when it lied about its debt and annual budget information in order to join. While Germany and France were privy to this knowledge, they let it slide due to political reasons. They wanted to once again show the increasing influence of the euro as a currency, and they thought it would be hypocritical to deny Greece for this reason, as their own economies were not adhering to the criteria of deficits and budget information that they set. This means that while other EU countries had had some experience getting their public finances in line, Greece had no national experience coordinating such an effort. Not only that, but they were in worse financial shape than other European countries using the euro going into the 2008 financial crisis. At the beginning of 2009, Greece was reeling from the effects of not having tourism added to their GDP as much, and they announced that they were running a 12.5% budget deficit compared to their GDP for that year. This caused many of the credit agencies to downgrade Greece's rating, causing many creditors to be scared off from purchasing Greek bonds. And so, the cost of Greek debt dramatically increased. The following year, Greece announced it might default on its debts. At this point, the International Monetary Fund in Germany decided to step in and provide 110 billion euros in emergency funding just to cover the interest fee on bonds for the next 3 years. In return for this assistance, Greece had to adopt numerous austerity measures. Some of these include liberalizing state-run utilities such as electricity, transmission, and transportation, and cutting the pensions of many governmental workers. Furthermore, the corporate tax and value-added tax were increased during this time. This is in line with Catherine Furlong's piece on sovereign debt, which details how international organizations providing debt assistance ultimately take control of the public finances of the indebted country and force them to recalibrate their entire economy towards paying off debt rather than growing and serving their people. Furthermore, those most reliant on state-run utilities and pensions were often the poorest in Greek society. This has real effects, as the World Bank Group's study found that these measures led to worse outcomes disproportionately to Greek people who were in the lowest income brackets at the time, and these measures at the time slowed down the rate of economic growth within Greece. Over the course of the next decade, Greece would enter a cycle of taking on more debt, slowing down its own growth and struggling to pay back new debt, and thus would need to take on new debt. Eventually, in 2018, a novel step was taken in significantly reducing the annual obligation of paying back old debt for Greece, allowing them to make payments on debt far into the future, as was earlier mentioned in this video, as late as 2060. The entire situation perfectly illustrates the mechanisms of debt and austerity in economic geography. All of this also serves as an example of the links between ballooning national debts and official aid Conditionalities, written by Shana Potts. She discusses the secondary market fix that enables the international financial system to muddle through successive crises. These deep secondary market debt structures push countries back into cycles of debt and allow international organizations to control their economies and to force them into the international economy even when they don't want to be a part of it. International organizations such as the European Union and the IMF were able to dictate the terms of Greece's debt and thus allowed for their state debt to manifest as a fiscal, ethical, and political issue that encompassed all of Greek affairs since 2009. All this allowed for a transfer of welfare and power from Greece to these international organizations and Germany, which even to this day dictate much of the internal affairs of Greece.